everyone, hope you're doing well. Today, unfortunately, my jaw is hurting quite a lot, so if I sound a little bit different than usual, that's pretty much why. But today, what I want to talk about in War Thunder is the idea of modifying modifications, or changing the way that you garner modifications for vehicles in the game. The reason why this has been brought on is pretty much twofold. The first one is obviously the recent changelog that we had, which modified the way that mobility works in the game, you know, basically making stuff like tracks and also suspension and things like that a little bit less required to make sure that, you know, your mobility of your vehicle is still pretty high. And I think this was a positive change because it meant that there was, you know, less need for the modifications, so there is less, you know, distance between your vehicle being spaded and your vehicle being stock, which is always important to me. Also, over the last few weeks, during the space race event and even, you know, during the last week or so, I've been playing a lot of high tier stuff. Now, obviously, I haven't been playing, you know, the top tier of stuff because I'm still, you know, researching enough of it for me to feel comfortable to actually build lineups. But basically, what I've been doing is I've been researching all of rank 5 of America, spading a lot of the vehicles alongside of spading stuff like the rank 6 T95E1. For Germany, I've been spading a bunch of their rank 6 as well, in the form of the Baguette Panzer, trying out the TAM, the A1A1, and the Rakuten as well. And in the process of, you know, spading these vehicles, been able to unlock myself the 2A4. For the British, I've been, you know, spading vehicles such as the Chieftain, Mark V, since it got its BR changed to a proper BR instead of the one that it had before. And then with Italy as well, spading stuff like the Mark IIA, getting myself the Ariete, and so on and so forth, just basically playing a lot of gameplay around 7.7 to 8.7 into the 9.7 bracket. And the main thrust that I found from this is, first of all, you know, the gameplay isn't too different to other tiers, apart from you have access to more mechanics, so therefore the stock grind hurts a lot more. And also, the fact is, when it comes to a lot of these vehicles, they are so different compared to their stock configuration, compared to their spaded configuration, and it really hurts, to be honest. It really hurts with a lot of these vehicles. The best example I can give you is something like an M48. So an M48A1 that you see here. Now, I actually have some pretty cool skins for this vehicle, you know, the War Eagle and also the Tin Can one. Well, sorry, I don't have the Tin Can one, but I have the War Eagle one. I think it's really nice, like the fact that we have stuff like the marketplace around so we can have a look at these things. But the M48A1, the modifications matter so much for this machine. You have a terrible APCR round as your stock shell, so you have to use this when you first get the vehicle. Then you have access to the M82 shot, which is a little bit better, but if you run into anything that has any sort of armor, there's nothing you can do. And then you eventually get the Heat FS shell, and you start actually, you know, feeling powerful in the vehicle. And if you have a look at my stats in something like the M48A1, right now I am -5 when it comes to the KD area. I'm also a positive win rate in it. But this, before getting the Heat FS, before getting the engine upgrades, I was at about -20, -25, showing you how much of a difference having a lot of these modifications actually matters. And there is very much key modifications for the M48 as its mobility, so these three, and then also the heat shell on top of everything. The fact that artillery supports also is a modification is one which means that you can use it as kind of like a passive scouting idea, you know, being able to plonk it somewhere and see what, you know, is in the area is invaluable as well for information on the map. So you have all of these factors making vehicles such as the M48 such an unappealing vehicle to start with, but eventually going through it, feeling confident in the vehicle, and making it, you know, actually a pleasant experience once you ground out the majority of it. Now, for me, as a person who plays War Thunder, generally when I spade a vehicle, I'm done with it. So, I have the M103 that is now spaded. I probably won't take this out unless some kind of challenge or some kind of event calls for it. The majority of the time, once I'm done with a vehicle in its spaded form, I'm done with it. And the fact is, now that I'm running into a lot of top tier vehicles, or high tier vehicles I should say, I'm finding that after spading these vehicles and after taking a long time with them, because of the fact that their spaded cells are so different to their stock cells, I'm getting a very annoying experience where the tank starts getting good when you get all of the modifications, but I'm not able to really enjoy it because of the fact that I'm then moving on to the next tank to do the same thing. It's kind of like climbing a hill, climbing a hill and, having to struggle up to the top, and then just as you reach the top, sliding down into the next vehicle, and, into the next hill to then once again climb it again. So I understand that this is kind of personally imposed in a way, since I could play these vehicles after spading them, but because there are so many different vehicles in the game, it makes sense to me just to keep going and keep trunking on and playing different experiences and having fun in that way. So today in this video, after, talking about the issues I have with the stock versus spaded experience, I thought I'd come up with some solutions to try and, help this or aid this. And I've talked about in the past the idea that when it comes to, if you want to lessen the grind of the game, you're going to have to come up with different solutions to be able for Gaijin to make money, basically. Because by reducing the grind, you are cutting into their bottom line. And I want to, say that all of those solutions here would have to be the case if we implement some of the things that I'm thinking of. So let's get started with a few of the bullet points, basically just go through them and what they would represent. So the first one is taking the parts and FPE mechanic, which we have in the game, and applying it to other important modules. So if you didn't know, when you're spading a vehicle, we'll use the M60A1 Rise as just a random vehicle, just try and put, just to show you. So what you'll find with parts and FPE is that they will be a lot less RP compared to their counterparts at the same tiers or at the same ranks over here. So what you'll see is with parts it's only 2,400 to research, whereas with tracks it's 8,100, and then with FPE it's 1,800, and then with the brake system it's 6,100, which is the same as all of the other modifications. What if we took this idea? So we take this idea of reducing specific modifications to a certain level, which are seen as key modifications for the vehicle, and we just add it to different ones. Instead of just having parts and FPE being the priority, modifications, why not something like the APF SDS for the M60 Rise? Why not something like the rangefinder, the smoke grenade, the engine, the transmission, whatever it is, at the end of the day? And there are two ways you could implement this. So the first one would be one which I think would be the preferred one. What I would do is I would have all of the modifications, be the same price depending on their rank. So what I would actually do is I would make parts 8,100, and I would make FPE in this case 6,100, so it's equal to all of their ranks. Then what I would say is when a person researches, buys and crews a vehicle, they get the option to pick 3, maybe 4 or 5 modifications, and let's just say 4 in this case, and you can then apply the bonus which used to be on parts and FPE to those modifications. So you would get a reduced modification price and a reduced modification research idea on those 4 individual parts, so you could then make the grind easier for yourself. And the reason why you let the player decide is because you want to give the player, player choice. What we've seen over the last, year or so, there's been a lot of push towards this player choice idea, the map rotation filter being the main one, so why not implement it in a system like this? So instead of just plonking it so, Gaijin says these are the key modifications for the vehicle, why don't you let the player choose them themselves? It's kind of as simple as that. And I think that would make it so a lot of people would feel a lot more interested in the grind. A lot of people would take more interest in each of the vehicles and what, they want out of them and what they see as key modifications, because some people might see something like parts as key or FPE as key. Others will see, the M735 or the rangefinder, the engine transmission as key, and then they can just grind through parts and FPE quickly and then try and get these ones. There would be a lot of different ways that people would approach this, which I think would be really interesting to see, and it just adds another element to the, the player choice angle. The other thing you could do with it is just, basically, you could just expand, as I said, these ideas just to other modules picked by Gaijin themselves. So if, let's say, you're on the Sheridan or something, you would make the Shillelagh and maybe filters or engine reduced. And then to compensate for this, an RP cost, what you could do is you could increase the amount of RP required for other modules in the tech tree. So therefore, it stays the same RP cost to actually spade a vehicle, but in order to get a gameplay experience which is suitable for the vehicle in a half-spaded form, it will be easier for you and it will cost less RP. But the maximum cost of RP overall would be the same. This wouldn't cut into the bottom line, and also it would mean that you could get your vehicle to a functional state without it, really struggling a lot. The next idea would be removing the increase in research required for the end-of-line vehicles. So this is a very specific issue. It's one I've personally been running into with a vehicle like the TAM. So the TAM is an end-of-the-line research vehicle. What this means is, if you've never seen this before, end-of-the-line vehicles have massively increased research costs. When it comes to, parts of their vehicle. If you have a look at a similar vehicle, such as the, I suppose, the Rakuten 2, you can see that with 3 modules in rank 2, in 3 modules in rank 2, it's 11,000 and 12,000 respectively for the modules. If you have a look at the TAM, it's 20,000 and 18,000 for more modules across the board. So this should be technically half the cost of what you see from the Rakuten over here. But unfortunately, that's just not the case. It's actually nearly double the cost and double the amount of modules. And that is because of this thing in game where if you hit an end-of-the-line vehicle, like the KPZ-70 is the same, with its crazy high cost for everything. The Bradley as well, if you've ever played the Bradley, you'll understand the Bradley is the same way with these 25k stuff and then 27k for the rank 4 modifications. There's just this weird rule in the game when you hit the end of the tree that for some reason the modification costs have to go through the roof. Why? Like, why is that even a thing? Why is that something that has to actually exist in the game? I don't think it does. I don't think it's something that we should have in the game, because it means, like, spading stuff like the Jagdtiger, even though it is getting linked to the Baglet Panzer, it just becomes increasingly annoying to deal with. Same with stuff like the KV-1S and the T-34 ESTZ. Like, there is no need for this increase in BR because you're at the end of a line. I don't see any justification for it apart from the fact that, I don't know, you want people to research those vehicles more. And then when you have vehicles like the Sturm S, which struggles in so many areas because of the fact that it has a very unique playstyle and it doesn't really fit the meta of the game at all. And then you make stuff like its rank 2 modifications 28,000, and then stuff like its rank 3s 41,000, and then 32,000 for the rank 4s, right? If you compare that to the T80B, which is a 10.0 vehicle, none of these are anywhere close to that. It's just kind of ridiculous, and it screws over vehicles like the Sturm S a large amount, and therefore I would like to see the end of the line vehicles brought down to the same research costs as the ones which are in line with their normal BRs or their normal research costs when it comes to their overall required RP. The other thing is it makes top tier experience. So let's say somebody grinds out the Leopard 2A5, or somebody grinds out the Florac, or someone grinds out like the M1A2. It just makes the top tier experience even worse for that individual, because it means that now they've ground all the way up to the tech tree. They've got to the cream of the crop. They've got to what is seen as the best vehicle in the tech tree, and now they have to modify it to a crazy extent when it comes to its RP requirements for each modification. 32,000 for each modification for rank 4. There is no need for this at all, in my opinion. We should be getting rid of that rule, which is in the game. I don't think it's required. The next one is a pretty simple one, implementing an idea with the Warbond shop. So the Warbond shop is something that we've seen, get better over time. It is something that we have seen a lot of stuff added to it over time, which is kind of nice, and a little bit of an improvement here and there. One of the things I would personally like to see from the Warbond shop is a box, which could be, 1,000 Warbonds, 2,000 Warbonds, whatever it is. A box that you could get every month, or maybe you could get like 3 of them a month or something. And what you would do is you would use it as a way to click on it, and then you'll click a specific vehicle that you have, and it will give you a random modification for that vehicle, so a free modification. And now this functionality is already in the game. Sometimes after battles, you will get one of those, crates with the RNG thing on it, and it will sometimes just give you a free modification for your vehicle. And generally this is quite nice at top tier, because it means that you don't have to grind it out, and you also don't have to pay for it. But what if there was another way of doing it through the ideas of the Warbond shop? Basically taking that idea from that lottery system post-game and just sticking it in a Warbond box, so you can actually grind it out for yourself. And then if you don't like the RNG elements of it, then what you could do is you could just make it so it's not RNG, and you can pick a specific modification that you want out of a vehicle, and yeah, just make the grind generally easier for whoever wants to play that vehicle. I think that, to me, would be a nice thing to do. As I said, I think the Warbond shop is an amazing system in War Thunder, but adding to it will only make it better, and it will only mean that, players are more interested in grinding, especially higher tier vehicles. The next one is one I've talked about much, so I won't, spend too much time on it. Adjusting BRs, depending on what modifications are unlocked for the vehicle. So if you have a vehicle, let's say, I don't know, a very simple one is anything with like thermals, if I'm honest with you. But let's just say, we could say something like the Warrior, right? Like, even though the Warrior is not too bad stock, it is a completely different vehicle once I get access to NVDs, the Milan 2, the Airstrike, the APDS. All of these make the vehicle so much better than its stock configuration, and it just makes it so you turn from like a passive scout into an aggressive vehicle, especially now that they improved the thermals on this machine to a ridiculous level. So you just end up with a vehicle which is so much better than what it actually started with, especially when it comes to the speed of the vehicle as well. And I feel like, with that said, what we should be doing is targeting vehicles, such as, maybe the Warrior, but mainly stuff such as the M48s, the M48A2C that we see here with its stock M332 shell, stuff like the M48 for the Americans and the M47 as well, targeting these vehicles and saying, okay, well, if they don't have specific modifications, and you'd have to get rid of the uninstall install feature of modifications, so once you get a modification, you have it installed and it stays installed, so you can't have people abusing the system where, they'll be able to uninstall certain modules and then, get a lower BR. So what you would do instead is, get rid of the fact that you could uninstall modifications and bring in the idea that once you hit a certain amount of modifications, or once you hit specific, modifications in the modification tree, then your BR gets up. So let's say the M48 starts off as a 6770 vehicle, and then once it gets key modifications such as its engine, its heat FS, its rangefinder, so on and so forth, it then becomes a 73 vehicle. I think this would take a lot of work. I think it would take a lot of planning. I would be very surprised if you could do it for every vehicle in the game. But I definitely feel like certain vehicles should be targeted with this idea, because there are so many of them which are, as I said, completely different in their stock cells compared to their spaded cells. So therefore we have to try and make that grind easier for individuals to play some of the lesser vehicles which are harder to actually get off the ground. You know, stuff like the chieftains, which the amount of times I've just been barreled and I haven't been able to repair it because I'm in a position which, you know, is in favor of the chieftain but not near a cap zone, so, you know, I can't do anything there. And the amount of times that I've been shot from the air by a machine and not being able to do anything about because I didn't have parts or I didn't have FPE, I think it would be much better to set up a scenario where stuff like that doesn't matter as much. The next point is bringing more key modifications to rank 1 and rank 2 of the set. So one of the things that I've seen, you know, with depending on what vehicles I'm playing, where modifications are is incredibly important, because you need to get so many modifications per rank to be able to unlock the next rank. So if you're a vehicle or getting a vehicle like the TAM and you're researching the modifications on it, in order to get the APFSDS, you have to be able to not just get parts and then, you know, 3 of the rank 2 modifications, you also need 3 of the rank 3 modifications, and then you get to unlock the rank 4 modifications. But if something like, let's say, the DM23 or the engine upgrade was rank 1 modifications, then you would get access to them straight away instead of having to do this, you know, long grind to be able to become, you know, at least a slightly better version of the vehicle that you use. Another vehicle to go on is probably the Rise, which is the good idea of this, where, you know, you have Heat FS, which is rank 2, which is a pretty decent shell, but stuff like the Rangefinder and the M735, pushing them up along with the engine upgrade to rank 1 would make the grind just so much easier for these vehicles to be able to complete. So I think that is definitely something that needs to be thought of and needs to be had a look at as well. It's a simple idea, but it's one that would have a heavy effect on stuff. Same with even machines like the Sergeant York, right? The fact that the M822 round is rank 4, like imagine if this was rank 1 and you could just research it off the bat. It would make your actual, you know, air killing capabilities so much easier to do in the Sergeant York, where a lot of the time it is kind of a struggle sometimes unless you let them in and get them close. The next one is a simple one, is reducing the impact of modifications. So as I said near the start, in one of the recent changelogs, one of the things that was done was it was made so certain modifications had less effect on the mobility of a vehicle. What if we did this with a bunch of different modifications? What if we made it so the parts modification, instead of it being able to actually fix the machine, what if all it did was cut the amount of time it would take to fix the machine? What if, you know, if it's 100-second for a repair, and then if you have the modification of parts, then it becomes a 50-second repair? What about with FPE, instead of it being something that you unlock, and if you don't have FPE, you know, you just die to a fire? What if you made it so when you unlock the tank, you get 1 FPE, and then when you get the modification, you're able to get 2 FPE and the ability to reload it on spawn, on, you know, capture zones? What about if, you know, with certain shells, instead of unlocking the shell in its entirety and then being able to use it as much as you want, what if you could specify a shell, or what if you could, you know, just have all the shells across the board from stock, but you could only have maybe 5 or 2 shots of, you know, the shell if you don't have the modification. So stuff such as the M60 becomes a hell of a lot easier, because you don't just have to use the APDS round, but let's say you get 5 shells of the Heat FS, so you can use that over the course of the battle as well as the APDS round, instead of just having to struggle with that APDS round. I think that is also something that should be looked into. When it comes to artillery support, maybe the way that you do artillery support is once you get the modification, you then are able to, instead of it being a mortar support, it becomes an artillery support. So it goes from like 80mm rounds to 200mm rounds, that come in. So you do a little bit more damage, and you get a little bit more AoE, so therefore you can target people better with the modification. But it means if you don't have the modification, then you still are able to use the mechanic in the game. When it comes to thermals, maybe you get thermals off the bat, but then if you get the thermal upgrade, then you are able to actually, get more modern versions of thermals. Maybe you could do something like that. And another thing is, we kind of already have this mechanic in the game. It's called the rangefinder. So in a stock configuration, any vehicle can rangefind. Doesn't matter if it's a rank 1, doesn't matter if it's a rank 7, anything can range find targets, and it's based on your crew skills. But then you have a modification that improves that idea and makes it slightly better, depending on if it's just the rangefinder modification or the laser rangefinder modification. But the main thing is you build off, a pre-existing idea that is open to the player, and then you make it better through modification. Why can't we just take the principles that are designed around rangefinders and apply it to a lot more modifications to make it so the grind is easier through the vehicles themselves, and people can have a more enjoyable experience instead of having to wait, let's see, for the M48, having to wait 88 battles to get the machine fully spaded in order for it to be combat effective compared to what it should be, before. Or with the M103, 93 battles that took to be able to spade, or 92 battles that took to be able to spade. Why can't we just have it so it is just easier? To actually get to that point. It will take the same amount of time because the actual numbers for the research won't change, but it'll just mean while you are doing it, it will be more of a pleasant experience. And since it will be for everyone, there is no real competitive advantage because everybody will feel, everyone will feel the same impact on each of their own vehicles. So yeah, pretty much as simple as that. Hopefully we can get some of these ideas rolling. I think the Warbond one is probably the easiest one to do. I look forward to seeing changes in the game when it comes to the way that modifications interact to their vehicles. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I just want to thank Ambrosius McClellan, B. Young, Blackie, Chris Giltnane, Daniel Stanton, Jay Wilt, John Ryman, Martinez, Super Cacti, Trigger Hippie, Eugens Terry, and also Elove Goat and Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.